Hi, everyone. So sorry I had to miss the last meeting, but I did have the opportunity to listen to the recording, which I thought was really, helpful slash sobering reality of data that was provided. But I would love to hear comments from I know Carrie, I saw you on, and Kim, were you on the call as well? Yeah. So I'm just, a couple of things struck me about it that were just, I think, the need to continue to look to leverage partnerships, which came out, I know, towards the end of the discussion, because obviously whatever we do, I think, is going to be in concert with somebody else. And Carrie, I know once again you offered, Southern support and trying to build off of the programs that they have in place. And then they talk about the community colleges, which is something again that has come up as a potential partner, going forward for all of us. But and then also one of the things as a provider struck me is obviously the living wage and the need for individuals. And obviously this was a DDS focused discussion that was happening, but the need for individuals to make a minimum of $24 an hour just to survive and not work more than one job. So, that was very striking. And I think as a provider, we're constantly, struggling with, and obviously during the session, advocating for our rates, because this is hard work. As Kathy, you don't know this, but others on the council know, I just retired as a president at Hospital for Special Care. I've been there 21 years. I'm continuing to support the work that's being done in autism, but more importantly, or as importantly, is support the transition to the new leader in the organization. But I'm also the mom of a now, hard to believe, 29-year-old young man with autism. So a lot of lived experience. And I know more, as well as all of you on the call know, especially those of us who are parents, the work that these folks do working directly with our loved ones is incredibly difficult. And, I'm always just astounded at the commitment of those who stay. That was another staggering thing from my perspective, is looking at the turnover rates. And I mean, I would say that they were much more significant than we experience at the hospital. And I'm not sure why that is. But those were things that were sort of takeaways for me. And I just wondered, for those of you who were able to listen in, sort of what your thoughts were about that, having time to reflect on that conversation. So I'll pause there. Kim or Carrie, I don't know if either of you have thoughts on.
Do you want to start, Carrie?
No, because I'm trying to collect my thoughts. So go right ahead, Kim. Thank you.
Oh gosh, that was what I was trying to do. I mean, I think Lynn, you captured it beautifully. There's a lot of work to do. And I think it's a multi-year problem that is going to require probably incremental steps to solve.
Mhm.
And my overall takeaway is, I think the more strategic we can be, the more precise in what our goals are going to be, not like this generic, like we're going to come up with people who don't exist and pay them living wages.
Yeah.
Like I love those goals, but that is probably not narrow enough for us to be able to say, here's what we can do as a council. Here are the action steps we can take. And that, to me, that's just been my overall take.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think the challenge is so multifaceted and overwhelming when you think about it from, you try to think about it from all angles and grapple with the complexity. That, I just got off of another meeting, and for Tara, you were on the inclusive housing meeting last night, but what things I want to take away from that and share here is the idea of sharing personal stories is really inspirational. That is what hangs with people, right? It sort of settles deep into our brains and our memories. And there was a man who spoke out of his own lived experience and so forth, and that was compelling. And if we can if we can find the right people to tell their stories, that may help us in finding the right people to recruit into this world. Because in large part, unfortunately, unless you are impacted or someone you love is impacted, it's really easy to not pay much attention to what is happening. But stories are compelling, right? So if you can bear witness to someone's story, be it a story of challenge or success, that is powerful. And I think we could come together as a larger community and try and tap some of our resources within this community to invite people into the fold and do it in a really compelling way, rather than, I mean, we can spit statistics at people, we can highlight all the challenges, we can have nice, shiny, bright, points on a on a slide, and people walk away from that. But if you can inspire people through sharing really powerful stories, I think that's a way to make some inroads, be it with legislators or people who work for, people who in positions of power of all sort. I guess that's what I'll leave it at.
Yeah, I think, Carrie, if I can piggyback off of that, I think that to me, you know, I've been in this autism world my entire career. And I think that, what was the most compelling conversations and stories were not, and not to belittle the family stories, but on the day at the legislation, some of the most compelling stories were from those direct supporters. Like, I want to be here. This is the job I want to do. I just can't afford it. I think that was, when we look to talk about advocacy for some of those things that we were discussing, I think that that was really heard loud. I think that was really heard loud and clear, and I agree with you. And even last night, and if you guys want to go back, and we're referencing, we had a person present on a inclusive housing model that they're doing in Virginia. And I will be posting that. Admittedly, I was a little lazy. So I was like, well, if I have to go into the website and post today's video, I might as well just do it all at once. So I haven't posted that video yet from last night. I was going to do it this afternoon. But one of the compelling was from the supporter that they have, and how invested he was in not only just the model, but supporting people. Because one of my questions to him was, well, do you provide 24/7 support? And he was like, well, yes and no. Like, I'm always here for anybody. I'll always answer a text message, and you know, just. But he was like that. It wasn't like, oh, I'm on the clock or I'm off the clock. That just really stuck out to me from, last night, and from some of the stories that were shared at the legislature this year. So,
Yeah, that was interesting. I thought too, talking about these individuals who are doing this work, who many of them are doing multiple jobs, or having to work such extraordinary overtime, which of course they can because there's so much work to go around and not enough people. But obviously that does not only have an impact on them, but also on just their resilience in doing the work that they do. So I thought one of the things I was curious, and I admittedly don't know enough about it, but it was interesting that the lack of, I'm not surprised by the lack of understanding around the term of a direct support staff. But I wondered what you all thought about that, because I know that, at the hospital, we call our staff on our autism unit, the direct caregivers on that unit, we call them behavioral technicians, right? And we don't require them to have any sort of certification. We do more the, on the job training, because we came into this work 12 years ago or so, very with very high threshold, and we expected people to have bachelors, and we all this these very shiny credentials. And we very quickly realized that that was just not going to be a reality. Somebody with a bachelor's wants to make a lot more money. They don't necessarily want to do the frontline work that needs to be done. So we, we had to pivot. And so we, again, the work that they do versus the work that somebody is doing in a different setting may not be the same. But I wondered if sometimes we do collectively, the field does itself a disservice because it's so hard to understand what exactly is the work, right? And it is different in different settings, but I wondered what you guys thought about that, having some common nomenclature around that person directly providing that care. And could that be helpful potentially in being able to be, to your point, Carrie, more succinct about what is the work, And I think the other thing that's important, and I remember this from last year's Autism Day at the Capitol, is when the family spoke, one of the moms had, the whole team was there, sitting there, and they were like, these are the people that are making this happen. And that was super powerful. But collectively, I don't think we probably do enough of that. So it is they are, I sound, hokey saying this, but they really are the unsung heroes. The psychologists, the psychiatrists, all of the very highly credentialed folks do a lot of amazing, amazing work, but their work doesn't come to fruition without the day-to-day, hard work at the, with the ADLs and with all of the other work that has to happen with these individuals. So I just wondered if did that strike you guys at all, that there would be any opportunity for us as a collective, group of folks who work with individuals with autism to think about that, and could that be helpful?
That's a great example of what I was thinking about, Lynn, like what is like a precise, actionable step that we could take as a council. And I do agree. I think people use a lot of terms interchangeably, and they could differ from our definitions for those of us who are in the field versus those who may be community members. It may be helpful to really define, what do we mean by direct service? Who are those players? What kinds of certification or not requirements they may need or have? And one of the things we're talking about a lot of is that career pathing, because I think that could then naturally lead into that conversation. To your point about behavior technicians, we do the same thing, but we also try to talk to our individuals around that career pathing. And where can you go from here to help continue to feed the field? So I can see already a little organizer in my mind of, a table of we can break that down. And then that could be something that could be shared with legislators, with families, and programs to try to help everyone be on the same page.
And then folks don't feel like they have to leave the field, because they can actually grow within the work and have an opportunity to, make more money and to maybe do, a broader or higher level work. So sorry, Terry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's fine. I think that was definitely part of the conversation, in working with, Office of Workforce Strategy and DECD and like, all of those other agencies, to make sure that we have some consistent language in Connecticut. And I think that that's definitely where this group can leverage the other groups, and, we can all kind of come together and, try to be at least in line in that path forward.
Agreed. Jen, any thoughts from you? I know you were on the call as well. As I said, I missed the meeting, but I did have an opportunity to listen in on the presentation.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with everything that you all are saying. Certainly for workforce development, that's where we need to start, and it's the hardest work to do, and the hardest job to fill people in who qualified isn't the right word, but I feel like it's a job that you're born to do. It's not, you're called to do. It's not something that you're just like, oh, let me make some money, or it's not that kind of job. And I think I was at the I forget which legislative hearing I was also at a few last month or something, and it was the same kind of discussion, that it's not just a warm body that you need. It really is somebody who loves this job, is compassionate with the people they work with, and almost see them as equals and as, time that they get to spend and provide really cool experiences and also help thrive. So yeah, I think everything you're saying, I think the workforce development is not just identifying those people, but also how to help give them the skills. But the other things that we're hearing in some of the legislative hearings are the pay, right? So it's hard to compete with state agency pay for our small mom and pop providers. I can speak for us. We lose a lot of providers to the school systems or to the state agencies because the pay is just better. And they have true set shift schedules rather than, when you're doing in-home services and it's, nights and weekends and, crazy hours. So, yeah, anything we can do to help support the development, but also I think the support for those individuals when they're in that job, not just the education of it.
Yeah. The other thing that was talked about in the presentation was, really, and we've talked about this too, how do we leverage the work that's being done by, these different subgroups that are meeting and, either piggyback on it or, work to support that instead of creating sort of a separate and unique set of a work plan that I think, all of us with other, positions, requirements, responsibilities, it's going to be very hard to get. I think we're feeling some of that, right? We're all committed to this, but I feel it every time before a meeting, like, okay, what have we done since we last met? Or have we moved the needle at all on the discussion? Or are we just saying the same thing over and over again, right? So I know that we all feel that way. And so I had an opportunity to be talking with Representative Dathans the other day, and she talked about, the workforce work that's happening. And I wonder, are any of you on any of those committees that we can leverage that work, or can we be a part of, not only help to inform, but, maybe help to just to be a partner on some of those groups. I don't know if anybody has more knowledge than I do about what exact work is happening there. We hear workforce development, what's happening, right? What exactly is happening?
I know that there was some things that came out of 5001, and that may be what Rep. Dathan was referring to. And there is a report coming out, and I know there's some things that they're trying to do. Obviously, DDS has, that a staff person specifically for that. So I think that, that's a good point, that we almost need to kind of take an inventory of what we have going on across the state, or look to maybe host or try to pull everybody together to have maybe a larger meeting, or that has some outcomes that we could really help coordinate everybody working together, like if we pull all of our resources.
I thought of that when the speaker was talking about that they were one of 4, 8, groups that came together to work on this. And I thought that's really the kind of partnership that we need to have, I think, collectively. And, I think trying to do something, convene a couple of hour meeting for us to all be at the table could be very helpful. I think, we all have knowledge about what's happening and maybe, some good plans about how to address it. I know we have talked about in the past, and I've mentioned it here, it's not unique, but we developed a training academy for CNAs because we simply couldn't find them. So we trained them ourselves at no cost. We had to fix our own problem. And I think we could easily, there's a number of folks on this call who could be a part of, like the individual was talking about, coming up with a curriculum. We all could come up with a curriculum pretty easily, right? For what direct care staff would need to do. So how can we help with that, right? Can we provide a curriculum, and how do we bring the different pieces together and leverage the relationships and the knowledge I think that we all have, instead of trying to start from scratch and kind of work in parallel paths. Does that make sense to people?
Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
I would be happy to reach out and see, just from some of my connections and reach back out, to DDS, to Mary Pat, to see if, that's something that she would be interested in, doing. And, um,
Okay.
because I think we feel it everywhere, like, paraprofessionals in the hospital, at DDS, at DSS, I know Kathy Marchione has
Yeah.
been, very vocal about advocating for support for BRS. They've been extremely short-staffed. Um, Caroline, Jennifer, I know you guys are always looking for people. So, I mean, there's not lack of opportunity, but to collectively, I really liked the idea of the website, and,
Mhm. I,
pulling that together. And, it sounds like they were going to put out some stuff, some videos and things about, and some campaigning around being a direct support professional. So anything that we can do, to help support those efforts, but also, that's only one area, one agency, that doesn't really touch the scope of, the workforce that we need to, fill the void.
how would we, I'm trying to think about how to attack, this inventory, if you will, of, what groups are meeting, what work is done, how can we all sort of monitor that and figure out where we can connect to help move a needle for them, while also, doing the work that this group was charged to do.
I think that, I mean, would it be helpful to have like, almost like, I hate to say flyer because it's not really what but like some kind of, um blurb or informational thing that would be happy to send out to, that, like, the people at Office of Workforce Strategy that were working on that study, every, like, like Dathan, the initiatives around 5001,
Yeah.
and 23. Um, I can, I'd be happy to do that, but I would kind of like to have like a specific ask or, um, inquiry or something like that. So it would be helpful to me if I'm not just reaching out to reach out, like, without, to me, that feels like there's not like a purpose behind it. But, um, so something that can articulate our intention and what we're kind of looking to do, and not to be corny, not to say like we need a mission statement,
Yeah.
but like something that, would help me articulate that would be helpful.
Well, is it inquiring if they have already established curriculum or standards for their positions, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel? We could use what these organizations have put together if they have things. And we could use that to even figure out where gaps are and attempt to fill in the gaps.
I think that's one of the questions for sure. I think another is, maybe it's thinking of 4 or 5 questions that we would ask each agency around, what specific work are they doing related to autism? What are, have they established do they have established either protocols or goals, or do they, to, Kim's point, have they gotten to the point of developing a curriculum? Just maybe 4 or 5 things so that we could, we'll have knowledge of what work is exactly happening, and then how we, which group or all groups could we bring together to try to collectively move forward on it, because it sounds like there's a lot of splinter work happening, but it's not being done with any real overall coordination. Does that seem like a fair assessment from you guys?
And that leads me back to, if we're going to survey providers and do that kind of thing, it leads me back to one of our earlier discussions on, can we leverage like the USAID and the LEND program, and, work or Southern or work with students somehow, and if we could over the summer, if we could, kind of plan and be intentional about what specifically we would like, and maybe work on that provider survey over the summer, collect not collect the data per se, but kind of look at what information we're looking for, maybe do some of that background work to say, be able to articulate the why we would want that provider survey done. So, and how we would envision using that data to help with, building the workforce or, looking at curriculum and educational programs.
Sure. Would it make sense to, I mean, I can almost visualize it at the right point. I think we can't just bring people together without having a well thought out agenda, if you will, because everybody's busy and we'll just circle the drain again. But I think if we could, if it ended in sort of a forum where we brought things together and could come up with an articulated plan, collectively, what are the priority areas in terms of the workforce as it relates to autism, and actually have an actionable plan about who's going to work on what, like what's most relevant for this group to be able to contribute to. We're not going to fix everything, right? We don't even know where to begin, frankly. I think we all know where there's pockets of need, but I think that would give us some direction at minimum. And if it's, post session, I think involving and getting the legislators at the table with us who have the knowledge and the power, frankly, the influence is a better way to put it, to help, make some of these changes. And I think having some, providers or some members of the workforce there to help talk about this would be helpful as well. Those are just thoughts. What does the group think of that?
I think no other group of people could speak more clearly on what the needs are than the providers and the people actually doing the work. So I think that's who they need to hear it from.
Mm-hmm.
They hear a lot of data about the gaps and everything and all of that kind of stuff. That's all very public knowledge. But I think they need to hear the personal stories of the staff.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I think this is for me, it's a kind of a yes and knitting things together. So when I was talking earlier about the stories of individuals and families who either have been successful, I mean, I think you illustrated that, Lynn, with a team being brought by family, but and the providers, right? So when you're talking about the providers who say, I really, really want to do this work, I just can't. I mean, we even have members of our council who are saying, I'm taking, a considerable financial hit if I stick with this but the need is abundant, and how can I turn my back on? I think knitting those stories, those perspectives together really develops a fuller, richer picture of what is ongoing, because you want to inspire people to join this. Not, there are going to be some do-gooders who are called to this and they don't need to hear the stories necessarily, but the stories do compel people to explore things more. They are, they're what I just keep coming back to. They're what sort of sits in your memory for longer periods of time. Right. I remember this story, I'm making this up, but someone might say, I remember this story of this family bringing this whole team, right, and what was so moving was all of this team was invested, and that made all the difference. That leveraged, opportunities and change and so forth for this individual and their family and so forth. I also think, this is where sort of multiple perspectives are important too, because we can speak to people about what we readily see or what the providers readily see and acknowledge are the challenges in this. But, you got to kind of put all the points together and connect those dots for people. So if you don't invest in this community, if you don't invest in the workers who are going to help, then guess what? We have people who are taxpayer, I hate to say it this way, but like taxpayer dollars, until it impacts them, right? Until their lives are personally affected by having to address the fact that there are more people who are unemployed or whatever. Not, I don't want to get political about this, but I want to sort of shine a light on a counterpoint of what has been in the news recently, which, you know, is like folks are employable. Folks can have lives. They can be taxpayers. They can, right? If the right supports are in place to allow for people to get to that point. So we collectively, as a community, right, need to recognize that we're all a part of the same shared community. So we need to invest in each other, right? And until sometimes we highlight that this does impact you, even though you don't have you don't have an autism spectrum disorder, you don't have an individual in your family who, it does impact your community, it does impact your pockets, so to speak. You know, you kind of just need to like present multiple perspectives and lead people to understand that these are connected, right? Like draw the lines between the dots.
I think even further talking about workforce development, you know, the whole way I got into this field was because there were people that came to my Psych 101 class in college and shared their story of being behavior technicians and working with a little guy with autism and needing more people because they were graduating and needed new people to kind of take on this work. I think you know, those stories need to be shared at community colleges, psych classes, education, you know, classes, anywhere where there's people who would be interested in working with this population. You know, it goes beyond just educating the people who fund it.
I agree.
That's why I think they don't even know, individuals don't even know what, that goes back to,
Right.
I think, one of my original points. What is the work, right? Can
Right.
I do it? Am I qualified to do it? Can you train me to do it, right?
Right. And
Yeah.
so many people, especially in psych, are like, what the heck am I going to do with this degree? Right. But if you're giving them some direction right in the beginning, um, you know, they might be able to pursue it a little bit more quickly or accurately.
Sure, sure.
I just said that earlier, Tara, in a meeting. Like, we need to be going into local high schools and present, because I just happened to be in a high school earlier well, yesterday. Hey, there's a lot going on. And
Sorry to interrupt, Jerry.
highlighting, what's that?
So sorry to interrupt. I have to jump to another meeting. I have a bunch of apologies. First of all, I'm sorry that I wasn't there for the start of the meeting, but appreciate all the work that you're doing, and I'm so happy you had a chance to meet Catherine. We both have a 3:30, unfortunately, so we won't be able to do the rest of the meeting, but happy to have the introduction made, and looking forward to the collaboration moving forward. Jen, it's funny you say that. That was my when I graduated with my BA in psychology, I said the same thing. What the what am I going to do, right? And until you kind of find your path, so that definitely resonates with me. But so appreciate you all, and looking forward to our next session.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay, take care.
Nice to meet you, Catherine.
Yep, bye.
Yeah, it's true. It's funny how many of us have backgrounds in psychology, because that was my undergrad degree as well. And I got my sort of the bug to work with folks and pursue psychology by working at a VA. So interesting, but you're right. I mean, I think you got to grab people early and help them, see a path forward. I think it's powerful to be able to do that. So. But I think we can plan next steps in terms of, I'm happy to take a stab and send to Tara that there are just a couple of questions that we might start the conversation with, and think about a timeline. When do we want to try to gather this information by? Can we convene a group? I think a group, a focus group that, who knows, maybe it ends in a press conference that talks about what we need to do, or we have to, I think, we have to do something louder than we're doing now, in order, I think, to move things forward, because we're all working on it in our own way, but we're not going to move the needle collectively without, I think, the support of others who are already doing some of this.
Right, because I think everyone's kind of in their own bubble or their own niche, right? So DDS, like what they presented and what they're doing, that's great. But it's only helping those who are already receiving waiver services, and, really isn't, a picture of the whole, like everything across the state, with all the openings and DSS and BRS and, so there's a lot of agencies that are looking for, workforce. So I think that, as far as next steps, like I said, I'm happy to, part of coordinating between agencies is what I was hired to do. So I'm happy to take something and kind of send that out and say, we're looking to gather information on what you're doing around workforce, specifically to in the autism, but also the larger, people with disabilities category, because I think that if we narrow ourselves to autism, then we're just gonna
Right.
we're not gonna get the level of information that we want, because they're gonna say, well, we're looking at people with disabilities. So if we look at that larger group, if we send something out, then we can kind of look to hone in and do some unique things around autism too, specifically.
I think too, even getting the word out to career centers, the guidance counselors and career centers. Yes, it's great to go to the individual classes because it's a little bit more of an individual touch, but getting, flyers and information out to, all of those career centers that help connect people to internships or experiences within their academic setting, I think could be really beneficial too.
This is something I'm just having I think it's a great idea. And I was visiting with school counselors yesterday. So that's where the thought came to me. That's kind of being presented here too. But there are in my town, for example, our school district worked with a community college, and some of the coursework, if you will, was sort of infused into the design, to get a CNA. So they're high school
Academy
kids
kind
who
of
now
thing? Are they
say
like
again.
academies, Carrie, like within the high
I guess
school?
it's just sort of a I don't know that no, we don't have academies necessarily, but
Okay,
we do have, it was just sort of an option, a curricular option that
okay,
was presented. I'm not sure how
okay.
they referred to it, but some of these students are then able to get CNAs. So if you work
Yeah,
with, reach down into, and we obviously could do it on a larger scale with connections to the State Department of Education, reaching out to various superintendents, and partner with colleges, community colleges or state colleges or whatnot, to say, like, here's a certificate you could get that would make
yeah,
you
absolutely.
eligible or a good candidate for this sort of a job. And that would be the first step, right? First stepping stone along that path for folks that we're talking about. But it does make them aware of, because, to your earlier point, Lynn, like, we don't have common language, nor do people understand what the work is. So if we kind of create some pathways for people to sort of enter into the world, they gain a better firsthand understanding, but also are reaching sort of into our local communities to say, here's a kind of a ready-made opportunity
Yeah,
through and if it's in partnership with universities, it might be, I don't know, credit eligible or certificate
yeah,
eligible,
yeah.
whatever. So it's worth exploring, and I think that might go a long way for increasing awareness and opportunities for young people too.
Great. We need to get some of them at the Capitol for Autism Day, and that would be interesting, right? Because they could actually, I think what also as much work has gone on around awareness, what kids think of in terms of autism, what that means, and who they know might be very different. Probably is very different than all of the different opportunities that could potentially exist. So, yeah. Okay. Good. Other thoughts?
So what I have for next steps then is to kind of come up with something to do some outreach to all the other agencies to see what's happening at their agency around workforce development and for people with disabilities, and if there's any interest in kind of forming some kind of collective coalition or larger group meeting slash whatever to leverage everybody's resources and look at putting something valuable out for the field at large. And even if it's just that common language, or, common, professional titles or whatever. Because if everybody's using that when they're putting out job ads or whatever, and that we're all, if somebody's going into the high schools or going into the career centers, or they're using the same terms, like, oh yes, I've heard of that. Or if you see that on Indeed or something like that, then you would know, oh, I've heard of that before. I've heard of that job or whatever. So, so that was the one thing I had, for like next steps to follow up for next time. So Len, do you want to send me kind of
Yep.
a blurb of
Sure.
what we would want, the information that we would want? We can send it out to this group to, weigh in on, and then I would be happy to, send that information out to.
Okay, sure. I'll take a first stab at it and get it
Okay.
over to you, and then we can go from there. Sounds good.
Okay, perfect.
Great. And when's our next autism council meeting? I know I saw it on the list, but is it in?
Not until June.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then this meeting we'll have again at the end, but it would be nice if we could, and then over the next couple of weeks, I could probably get some responses from people. If we
Right,
can.
that's what I was thinking. We would have
Yeah.
something to at least bring back to the larger group to say,
Yep.
this is something that we're moving forward with. Okay.
Yep. So at the end of May, I don't think there's any in our meeting for this. There's no conflict with like the holiday weekend or anything, but, so at the end of May, we can regroup, talk about what feedback we got, and then we would have something to take to the larger group for next steps.
Okay, sounds good.
I'm sorry, unrelated. Does the council have anything planned for Monday at the state capitol? Okay.
No, because the council doesn't run it. It's because it's a legislative. So I mean, I'm just going. I plan to be there, and they have like some tables and stuff like that out, but there's no formal participation or anything like that. So
They still do have the program scheduled though, right? As I
Yeah.
recall, it's been a while since I will be there as well. Yeah,
Yep. Okay.
great.
They'll do like a press conference, Kim, and then they'll, they have like the tables, and so then it's just kind of at least that's how it was last year. I think they put it in a room this year, which
Yes, which is a very good idea because that was
it was so
very
bad last year.
unfortunate. I felt so bad for the speakers, and
I
so
did too.
yeah, good.
So
I haven't seen any more of an agenda than that.
the
Okay.
press conference starts at 10, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Very good.
Great.
All right. Very good.
Thank you, guys. You get
Okay.
15 minutes back in your day.
Thank
All
you.
right. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. See you guys Monday.